When I opened my eyes, the room was already dark. Everything earlier seemed like a dream. Everyone was together. Father, mother, Satoru, Shun, Maria, Mamoru. I can't remember exactly, but there may have been others as well. In a familiar dinner scene, the dining table was replaced by the ball tournament field. Satoru and I were on the side, trying to use our cantus to move the pushers. The opposing team was steeped in shadow, so I couldn't tell who they were. Innumerable enemy pieces rose up from the earth and bore down on us. We ran blindly without knowing where the goal was. The enemy chased us persistently, gaining territory while pressing us farther and farther back. We were slowly being driven into a corner. Soon, we were completely surrounded. Just as I thought we had no way out, the nearest enemy piece was blown away with a solid bang. Then another, then even more, as if in a chain reaction. It was unmistakably Satoru's doing, blatantly breaking the rules. No, even more than that. I suddenly realized that the enemy's pieces looked like quirats. Panicked, I tried to escape, but couldn't without killing them all. I stared dumbly at Satoru. Part of his face was in shadow, and I couldn't see his eyes, but there seemed to be a slight smile on his lips. I woke up with my heart racing. Then I recalled where I was. At once, the anxiety caused by the real world swept away all traces of the dream. How long had I been asleep? If Satoru's intuition was correct, we were still in danger. Listening carefully, there were no sounds other than Satoru's breathing. I realized there was something near my pillow, 2 bowls on a wooden tray. I picked it up but couldn't tell what was inside. I sniffed it and smelled the faint scent of miso. Just then, my stomach let out a loud growl. Thinking back on it, I hadn't eaten anything since lunch yesterday. There were no chopsticks, but something roughly carved out of bamboo that looked like a lotus. I hesitated for a second, then put the lotus into the bowl and brought it to my lips. I didn't know what was in it, so I tasted it carefully. It was extremely bland, like porridge with nothing in it, but before I realized it, I was spooning fervently from the bowl. The bowl was empty in seconds. In my hunger, I looked greedily at the second bowl. It was his share, but if he continued to sleep like this, he wouldn't need it tonight. Of course, I wouldn't actually steal his food, but being only half full was even more unbearable than not eating at all. I tried to wake Satoru, though I knew that I should just let him sleep. To be completely honest, I wanted to shake him awake and tell him that there was food, and have him say that he didn't want it so I could have it instead. I shook his shoulder, but he didn't wake up. It was pointless. He had single-handedly stopped a blowdog from exploding and thrown another deep into a cave. On top of that, he had already been exhausted and wasn't in any shape to be using his cantus to begin with. If he hadn't managed to muster up the last of his strength, then we would all have been blasted to death. Embarrassment flooded through me, and I stopped shaking him. Now I was starting to worry. Could pushing his body and mind past their limits leave lasting damage on his brain? On top of that, there could also be side effects from the haphazard hypnosis I used on Satoru to help him regain his cantus. Satoru let out a quiet groan. I couldn't see him clearly, but he seemed to be grimacing with pain. I leaned in and kissed him softly. His face relaxed into a slight smile. There was a glimmer as his eyes caught the light. Although this wasn't a prince's kiss, it seemed to have the same effect. "Saki, how long have I been here?" he asked hoarsely. "I don't know. It's already dark outside." Satoru sat up slowly. "Is there something to eat?" I passed the bowl to him. "How did you know?" He put his finger to my lips. So the prince didn't wake from the princess's kiss, but from the lingering aroma of food. Satoru must have been hungry, since he finished the bowl even faster than I did. He looked like he wanted to lick the bowl when he was done, but noticed me looking at him. "Hey, do you think we're still in danger?" I asked the question that had been bothering me the most. "Yeah," he said without hesitation. "But what danger? The ground spiders have been wiped out." Satoru put his finger to my lips again, though for a different reason than before. "Isn't there a guard outside?" To be honest, I had not thought of that. We had been sleeping like logs inside one of the rooms of the giant hornet camp. It was a simple shelter with a thatched bamboo roof. The only entrance was covered with a hanging straw mat. I crawled slowly over to the entrance and peeked outside. There they were, 2 armored quirats standing guard. Silently, I crawled back. "There is." Hearing this, Satoru pulled me closer and whispered in my ear. If they're low-level soldiers, they probably won't understand much Japanese. But let's talk like this just to be safe. His breath tickled my ear. I put my lips to his ear. But why do we have to be so cautious? The giant hornet colony is... Before I had fallen asleep, I had thought of the same question. You're right. They're the most loyal to humans, he whispered. But that doesn't mean they're loyal to us. Kiromaru and them are only unswervingly obedient to the adults, right? So in the end, their priority is what the ethics committee says. He stopped abruptly. You don't think the ethics committee wants to do something to us? His hand tightened on my shoulder. We met the false Minoshiro and learned things we're not supposed to know about. But that... Shh, you're being loud. Satoru was silent for a moment, his attention on the door. Let's assume what the false Minoshiro said is true. It's disgusting to imagine, but if humans really could attack each other with Cantus, our society would be destroyed in an instant. So wouldn't they use any method possible to prevent that, no matter how frightening? But are they really going to do something to us? Don't people always say that they remove potential problem children before anything actually happens? In other words, they're disposed of. Disposed, it can't be. Don't say something so ridiculous. That can't happen. Think about it. In Harmony School and Sage Academy, students disappear every year, don't they? It's weird no matter how you think about it. If they're not disposed of, where do they go? I felt all my hairs stand on end. Although listening to what the false Minoshiro said had been frightening, at the time I only half believed it, so I didn't think too much. But now I felt more terrified than I had been all last night. But no one knows that we met the false Minoshiro. Raijin was the only witness, but the blowdog explosion had killed him. There's proof, though, Satoru said chillingly. We had our Cantus sealed, right? They wouldn't do that unless we had broken a serious rule. So they're not going to help us? If the town decided to get rid of us, it meant that we had no place to return to. Tears welled up in my eyes. No, there's still hope. It should be possible to at least go back to the town. Our parents will help us somehow. Especially your mom, isn't she the head librarian? Why, yes, but my mind was spinning. Then what exactly are you worried about? Seeing that I still didn't understand, Satoru let out a sigh. Kiromaru will probably include us in his report about the ground spiders. If they find out that you can't use your Cantus, they'll know that something happened. And if they decide to deal with us right here, they'll command Kiromaru to do it. I felt that he was overthinking it. Getting rid of us, even though they have no proof for anything? It'll be too late once we get back, his voice shook. If we tell even one person about what we learned, the information will spread in an instant. And if what the false Minoshiro said about death feedback is true, then no one in the town can kill us. If they do, they'll die too. That means that they usually go outside the holy barrier to get rid of problem children. I think they use queerats. I was speechless. Would they really do something that terrifying? Cold sweat ran down my back. Did the initiation at the temple take place outside the holy barrier for the same reason? Kiromaru probably sends his reports by carrier pigeon since that's the fastest. If the pigeon is quick enough, it can get to the town before sundown. Then the committee will discuss and send back a response by the next morning at the earliest. Then we have to get out of here now! Yeah! It's obvious they'll send someone after us, but if we can make it to where the canoes are hidden, we may have a chance. Soon after, the worst possible situation became reality. Although Satoru had recovered a bit after sleeping, he was still far from being able to use his Cantus like he usually could. Just concentrating on a target made his head hurt, so it was as if his powers were still sealed. So how should we deal with the two guards outside? This situation was completely different from when we were trapped by the ground spiders. We left the hut as nonchalantly as possible. The two guards bowed deeply and sent us off. Slowly. Don't act alarmed, Satoru hissed. If we just look around like this, it'll look like we're taking a post-meal walk. It's not like we ate enough to need this, though. The camp was made of 20 to 30 small huts. Of course, the entire troop wouldn't fit in the huts, so most of them probably spent the night underground. The path between the huts was lit with braziers, around which fluttered enormous moths. After our battle with the ground spiders, the sentries seemed much more relaxed around us. They bowed silently when they saw us pass by, but made no other movements. Then, it should be easy for us to slip off into the night without too much difficulty. That was the plan. But a commotion erupted behind us, and we froze. Gods! Where are you going? Squealer. We returned slowly. You've woken. Have you eaten? Yes, Satoru said, smiling stiffly. It was quite good. Is that so? Our food is completely different. All they have here is that bland miso porridge. The giant hornets are not used to entertaining guests. Just for reference, what did you eat? How should I answer? Why was he asking such unnecessary questions anyway? I was starting to get annoyed. That aside, what are you doing? Well, I was working until just recently. I'm not complaining, since the giant hornets saved us and all. General Kirumaru was injured in the explosion, and writing reports is difficult for him. Speaking of, in such a huge army, General Kirumaru is the only one who can actually read and write Japanese, if you can believe that. What report? Satoru asked sharply. A simple account of the subjugation of the ground spiders was sent to Kamisu 66. Squealer looked blankly at us as we both started asking him questions. Saki, you go first. Okay, what did you write about the subjugation? Of course, the details of the entire battle, from us being attacked by poison gas until the part where reinforcements arrived. Did you write about us too? Huh? Squealer looked suspiciously at us. I mean, if you write something weird, our teacher will get mad at us when we go back. Don't worry, I will not write anything dishonoring the two people we are most grateful to. But what exactly did you write? Well, about how the gods were lost and met the robber fly colony by chance, and after that, how the gods helped us escape safely from the ground spider's ambush, stuff like that. Nothing other than that? I asked, relieved. Of course not. Just what? Since the two of you seem to have exceeded your physical limits, I thought you needed extra care, so I made a request out of concern for you. What do you mean? We're not well? Well, in this fight, the male god seemed to be the only one using his power. The male god is no doubt fatigued, and I thought perhaps the female god was ill. This meddlesome rat, despair and anger clouded my vision. I looked pleadingly at Satoru. Squealer, you said you were working until just now? Why was Satoru asking about something so irrelevant? Yes, I finished just a while ago. Then, how are you sending the report? It's too dark now to send it by carrier pigeon, isn't it? Yes, the giant hornet colony uses pigeons for emergency communications during the day and bats at night. We looked at each other. If they used bats, then the town's reply might come before the night was even over. By the way, some colonies have recently started using falcons instead of pigeons, which is against the rules of the original pact. And although using bats is supposed to be safer, I've heard that some colonies have started training horned owls to capture the bats. Squealer seemed determined to continue talking for the rest of the night. Hey, Squealer. I said as neutrally as possible. We kind of want to take a walk around there. Where are you going? Squealer looked surprised. It's already 3 hours past sundown. It's dangerous to go far. 3 hours past sundown was approximately 10 o'clock. It's fine. After all, the ground spiders have been exterminated, right? Satoru's jovial tone was much more natural than mine. But if anything were to happen, we'd be entirely responsible. I'll call for some guards right now. No need. The two of us just want a change of scenery. Okay? We'll be back soon. So there's no need to tell anyone, Satoru said, taking my hand and pulling me away. When we turned back, Squealer was still standing in the same spot, watching us go. Won't he think it's weird? I whispered. We can't help if he's a little bit suspicious. Anyway, we have no choice but to run away, right? We continued walking slowly away from camp. Pretending to look up at the sky, we peeked behind us. Once we ascertained that no one was looking, we hid in the shadow of the trees. Crouching low, we entered the grove of trees in the middle of the field. Do you know which way we should go? There was supposed to be a compass in my backpack, but after so much running around, I had no idea where it had disappeared. Yeah, kind of. Satoru looked up at the orange moon hovering over the treetops. It's almost the full moon, so the moon comes out from the east, travels through the southern sky at night, and sets in the west in the morning, since it's about 10 o'clock right now. Satoru's vague mumbling wasn't exactly comforting, but since I knew almost nothing about astronomy and had no sense of direction, I had no choice but to listen to his judgment. We traveled through the wilderness, going eastward as best as we could. Since last night, we had taken so many winding paths that it was impossible to tell how far we were from Lake Kasumigaura. And thinking back to when Rijin was leading us to the Temple of Purity, we had been unbelievably tired, but had somehow continued onward, making numerous zigzags as we went. Yet for some reason, I was convinced that if we just kept going east, we would make it to where the canoes were hidden before sunrise. After 3 hours of hurrying through the pathless forest, I was starting to lose stamina. My feet hurt and my head spun. I was starving, but more than that, I was so thirsty that it was almost unbearable. But since we had not prepared any water bottles, I had no choice but to endure it. Anyway, we took a break, choosing an area where the grass was wet with dew. We've gone pretty far, haven't we? Yeah, more than halfway there, probably, Satoru assured me confidently. I didn't think he had any basis for his claim, but I also didn't think there was any good in questioning him, so I accepted his words quietly. How were Shun, Maria, and Mamoru doing at this moment? I glanced unthinkingly behind Satoru as I thought, and jumped. What? Nothing. I just thought that looked like a blowdog. I pointed at a piece of rotting wood. Satoru smiled. It does kind of look like one. You weren't scared, though. No, you'd never see a blowdog around here to begin with. How come? Saki, you saw the blowdog's true form, right? It was hard to say that I didn't now that he had asked. Well, kind of. Kind of, Satoru laughed. There's only one self-destructing animal that lives in the wild. All the other ones have been modified by the Quirats to be domestic animals. Isn't there a possibility? For one thing, it's impossible. Before humans had Cantus, they spent a long time modifying domesticated animals, but this only works for animals with naturally good qualities. For example, mellow animals, or animals with good milk production, or those who can be modified to have good meat. Domesticating an explosive animal is extremely unlikely. Satoru was being a know-it-all again. I wanted to argue, but my blood sugar was too low from hunger to come up with anything. I surrendered. Then what's a blowdog? Ancient biology books talk about a self-destructing animal, just like the blowdog. What do you think it is? I was quickly losing interest in the topic. It could be whatever it wanted to be. A tiger globefish or a black-spotted pond frog. I was starting to worry about the other 3 people. Ants, Satoru said triumphantly. There's one type of ant in Malaysia that tears itself apart when an enemy approaches and releases a volatile substance into the air. It supposedly warns the nest that an enemy is nearby. I was now going from hungry to dizzy. If we kept sitting here, I probably wouldn't be able to stand up again. Anyway, that's what it is. If normal animals blew themselves up one by one in order to repel an enemy, they'd wipe themselves out because they wouldn't have any offspring. But it's different for social animals like ants. Since an individual has no reproductive powers, it's beneficial for them to sacrifice themselves to protect the nest and queen. If you think about it that way, blowdogs don't exist outside of the ones that are mutated ground spiders. Satoru didn't seem hungry, tired, or worried at all about the other 3. It was too much trouble to shut him up. As I slowly closed my eyes, I heard a faint noise. So, the ground spider queen is able to freely produce a number of different mutants, like the leaf fighters and the frog-looking guys. Out of all these, the blowdog looks like a totally different species. Its small head probably means it has limited intelligence, about the same as a dog. In other words, in order to make them explode willingly and be unconditionally loyal, they must not be very smart. I heard it again, from behind, sounds of dried twigs and grass being stepped on. Who or what was there? I put my finger in front of my lips and Satoru shut up immediately. Behind me. A sound I mouthed some words without making any noise. Satoru hesitated, then stood up decisively and said loudly, "Who's over there?" It was kind of a desperate ploy, but there was nothing else we could do. We had no weapons at the moment. If we ran, we'd be caught immediately. We had to pretend that we could still use our Cantus. "Gods, how far are you planning to go?" Squealer emerged from the shadows. Our plan to attack the enemy while he was unprepared was ruined. I didn't think he would track us all the way here. Even though the ground spiders have been exterminated, it's still dangerous to walk around in the middle of the night. Why? Why did you follow us all the way here? Squealer cocked his head at my question. If he were human, he might have shrugged his shoulders. If anything happened to the gods, I wouldn't be able to explain. We left by ourselves, isn't that fine? No, it's not all right. Our colony would be crushed, and the giant hornet colony would not come out unscathed either. Going by past examples, General Kiromaru would have to commit seppuku. What's seppuku? Committing suicide by cutting your stomach open with a sword. It's used as the ultimate apology. I was stunned. Our dictionaries did not have such a strange term, and we could never have imagined that people of the past would perform such actions. I see. I never imagined we would cause so much trouble, Satoru said meekly. But that's only in a really unlikely scenario, isn't it? Like if we had an accident and died or something. Yes, but in order to prevent that unlikely possibility, I must protect the two gods no matter what. Was he telling the truth? I thought as I looked at the ugly, naked rat. Is there anyone else following us? No, just me. That's strange. If you're going to protect us, wouldn't you bring soldiers? It was too sudden, so I didn't have time. Satoru's question addressed both our suspicions of whether Squealer was under orders from Kiromaru to keep an eye on us. Acting of his own will could be his plan to steal all the credit. Just 2 days ago, I doubt we would have been this paranoid. Anyway, are you thirsty? Squealer held out the gourd hanging by his waist. It sloshed with what sounded like water. We glanced at each other, but the temptation was too much to resist, so I took the gourd and uncorked it. We gulped down the lukewarm water. Instantly, my blood starting to circulate again, and I felt as if I were coming back from death. I passed the gourd to Satoru, and he drank as well. And yet you had time to prepare this. I wanted to express my gratitude to Squealer, but what came out of my mouth was a scathing comment. I took it from the soldiers as I rushed out after you. Taking one of these is no problem. As for the gods' protection, if another colony were to come along, there would be a lot of trouble. Suddenly I realized that when I first took the gourd from Squealer, it had been full. He was undoubtedly thirsty as well after coming all this way. Thanks. You drink some too. I took the gourd from Satoru and passed it over. Thank you. Squealer held it reverently in his hands and took a small sip. In that moment, Satoru and I looked at each other and came to an unspoken agreement. Squealer, we need your help, I said. He looked up immediately. Of course, anything. Please tell me what I can do. We're trying to get to the west bank of Lake Kasumigaura. Please show us the quickest route. But why are you in such a hurry? If you wait until tomorrow morning, the giant hornet guards will bring you there safely. Because if we wait until tomorrow, our lives will be in danger, Satoru said bluntly. Squealer had probably been sold by Kiromaru's promise to rebuild the robber fly colony, but unless we revealed everything to him right now, there was no chance of him coming to our side. What do you mean? Kiromaru might kill us. That will never happen. As though the Quirats and as the general of the largest colony, he would never think of harming the gods. I can't explain, but trust us. I took Squealer's hands. He seemed surprised, but didn't pull away. If that wasn't the case, we wouldn't be trying to run away in the middle of the night. Squealer thought for a moment, then nodded gravely. I understand. I will show you the route. However, pursuers will probably use the same path, so we must hurry. Walking along the river, running through the bottom of the valley, felt much better than creeping along the precipitous mountain paths. Thanks to this, we made good progress, but we were still under enormous pressure. In the mountain, we never knew what was going to pop up in front of us, and it took considerable courage just to keep walking forward. But in the valley, our backs were exposed, and there was nowhere to hide. It was unexpectedly frightening. Moonlight barely reached the bottom of the valley. The river was black as ink, only the sound of rushing water could be heard. It drilled into my consciousness until I couldn't tell if it was coming from the river or from my own mind. The sound changed until it was like the war cries of an infinite fleet of Quirats, or the roar of some other beast. Satoru and I kept turning to check behind us to make sure there was nothing there. But far from assuaging our fears, the invisible river seemed to beckon us to the underworld. What's this river called? Satoru's voice came from far away. The gods have not given it a name. We call it X. In Japanese, it would mean, let's see, the forgotten river. Why is it called that? I asked. My voice was strangely hoarse, as if it were someone else talking. I'm not completely sure, Squealer said, sounding as though he was somewhere deep underground. But there are a lot of rivers that empty into Lake Kasumigora, like the Sakura River and other larger and safer rivers, so it may just mean that the river has been forgotten. Hopefully, Kiromaru forgets about it too, I said, trying to lighten the mood. You can hope, but a great commander like him would never forget. Squealer's response was unexpectedly bitter. The forgotten river is full of shoals and stones, so usually no one travels on it at night. That's one reason I chose this path. However, although this is a path General Kiromaru doesn't often travel, he has won many battles here. For example, the battle against the army ant colony, the fall of Greenwall. Army ant? There's such a colony? Satoru asked. They don't exist anymore. 5 years ago, they lost against the giant hornet colony and were completely wiped out. It was pointless to tell us about this now, but hearing him talk seemed to help us stay focused. The army ant colony was over 18,000 strong and praised as having the largest army. They excelled at siege warfare, and on this occasion had surrounded the giants and set up camp. Near the end stage of the battle, the army ant general Quicker dispatched all but the queen's bodyguards. Judging by his interest in wars, Squealer undoubtedly spent a lot of time reading historical records. He spoke animatedly. The army ant colony was stationed only a few kilometers away from the giant hornets. They could only move above ground at this distance, and since their army was so big, the front line was already halfway there before the rear troops even left camp. Quicker decided to wait at the foot of the mountain for the rest of the soldiers to catch up. He assumed that the smaller giant hornet troops were hiding underground and dismissed the possibility of being attacked from the cliff that we locals call Greenwall. General Kiromaru led his elite team secretly up the mountain and plotted an ambush. The enemy was right below the cliff that everyone assumed was too steep to climb. However, General Kiromaru saw a gecko climbing across the bare rock and said what would later become a famous quote, "Geckos have 4 legs. We also have 4 legs. If a gecko can climb this mountain, there is no reason we cannot." It was so absurd that I assumed Squealer was joking, but later, when I looked up the records of the Quirat Wars and learned that he had been telling the truth, I was speechless with shock. Through this, General Kiromaru suddenly came into the spotlight. The first name the gods gave him was Kidomaru, not with the characters Chidawan but Quidaoman. Squealer explained the 2 characters carefully. I get it. In short, it means that there's nowhere to run when Kiromaru is chasing you, right? I hid my question behind a joke. Yes, if General Kiromaru has seriously decided to pursue you, there's probably nothing you can do about it. A short silence followed. After seeing Kiromaru order the devastation of the ground spiders, it was obvious that he was a fearsome strategist. If he caught up with us, we wouldn't stand a chance. Everything depended on when Kiromaru would start coming after us. There was a time gap from when the ethics committee sent their order to dispose of us by bat to the time the pursuers set out. If we were lucky, we could get to the canoes by that time. The only problem was that Kiromaru might autonomously decide to come after us before the committee's reply arrived if he found out we had run away. It was possible he was chasing after us this very instant. We unconsciously sped up, but there was a limit to how quickly we could go, since the rocks by the river were slippery and dangerous. 30 minutes later, as we hurried along, dripping in sweat, Squealer came to a halt. "What is it?" Squealer put his hand to his lips and made a shh sound. This strange gesture was seen even in ancient books, its meaning transcending time and place, so that it was still understandable now. But I was surprised that it could even transcend species. "Do you hear that?" Squealer asked quietly. I listened carefully. I heard it, a bird's cry. Although it was the middle of the night, it called as it wheeled through the sky. Kyo-kyo-kyo-kyo-kyo-kyo-kyo. It sounded more like a giant insect than a bird, and the sound filled me with unease. Following Squealer's example, we stood still as rocks. The strange bird flew along the river's path, circling above us over and over. Satoru was the first to speak. So what? It's just a bird. In the middle of the night, though? Maybe it's a nightjar. They're nocturnal like owls. Was it really that simple? But why is it intentionally coming lower and lower? As expected, Satoru had no idea how nightjars behaved. He thought for a moment. Even though it's called a nightjar, it's probably not a predatory bird like owls and eats insects. It's catching insects by the river. Squealer, who had been silent until now, cleared his throat. This could be just a wild nightjar, but I strongly believe that it isn't. What do you mean? General Kirumaru tends to use birds as scouts. I've heard he uses nightjars because they have good night vision. I was surprised. Now that I looked at it, the bird did seem like it was looking for something. Really? It's kind of hard to believe, Satoru said suspiciously. How would a bird report that it had found something? I'm not clear on the details either, but honeybees are able to transmit information about where flowers are, so I'm sure it can be done with the right training. If Squealer's theory was right, then Kirumaru might be nearby already. We hurried forward under a heavy silence. Kirumaru was probably close by, tracking us noiselessly. The reason he hadn't attacked could be because the committee's response hadn't arrived yet, or that he wasn't yet aware that Satoru couldn't use his Cantus anymore. Or he might simply be waiting for a better place to carry out his attack. The more I thought about it, the more I felt the pressure of an unseen enemy. But just as there is no unending night, all hardship must also come to an end. As we continued walking east, the sky began to lighten. Dawn? Satoru suppressed a shout. Lake Kasumigara will be visible soon after we cross that, Squealer said, pointing to a large snaking river about 200 meters ahead. So maybe that really was a wild bird earlier. Just another part of our delusion that Kirumaru was coming after us. I felt relief for an instant. What is that? Satoru had noticed something. We stopped in terror. There, on the sandy banks of the river, as if expecting our arrival, were a line of silhouettes.